Hello and welcome back to another drawing workshop. So we kind of got all of the basics out of the way, I think, last time about supplies. So using whatever supplies you feel most comfortable with, today we're going to get into drawing a head. So the first thing I'm going to do is kind of show you the very mechanical, mathematical way to face features on a face. But then I'm going to branch off of that and sort of incorporate more of the gesture kind of drawing that we got into a little bit in the very first sketching video. Right there. And I'll kind of introduce a way that makes drawing a face a bit more, I'm going to say, fun. Sometimes just kind of really blocking it out leaves you with a very stiff, forward-facing, vacant face, which is great for practice. But as you get a little more comfortable with it, or you just, want to explore new things, you might want to use more gesture, kind of stretch and squish things a little bit, and this is going to lead us into later videos probably that use more cartooning techniques. But for now, let's just do the basic face. So as you can see, I drew a little trial face here, and I'm going to be going over the top of it just to sort of show you the proportions. So the first thing I started with is this circle. And if you can make a sort of squashed circle, more of an egg shape, the better, because that is sort of how our skulls are shaped. So something like this, I think, is a pretty good start for a general face. You can do it longer, shorter, because people's faces are built differently. But just kind of general for spacing things out and measurements, this is pretty easy to work on. So, and then you can see the next thing I did is I drew a central point. This one's a little off center, so I'm going to try to get this one more in the center of our circle, and it just goes straight down the center of the face, and this helps us space things on either side of the line, and especially helps us place the chin. The next line that I usually draw is going to be a line that curves around your circle. So imagining that it is in fact an egg, this line would bow a little in the middle, and this is not the eye line. I usually don't put eyes right on this line. This is going to be more where the eyebrows are, but it sort of helps you start the face. So you're going to start with the squash circle and this weird swoopy trident, I guess, in the middle. And then here is where you can kind of drop the jaw, so to speak. So this is often a lot up to interpretation, kind of what you're looking at, if you're looking at a reference, because there's a lot of variation in jaws. It can be higher, it can be lower. For this one, I sort of make this the halfway point, so I try to make the jaw about as long as the egg is tall, I guess. As long as the egg is tall, that makes sense. All right. At this point, once you have the full outline of your head kind of mapped in there, I'm going to start erasing some of your guidelines. You don't need all of them. So the midpoint up, you can erase that middle one. I'm going to lighten up this one here because we're not going to need it eventually, and you can erase the bottom of your circle. Okay. So the first thing that a lot of people will do is the eyes, kind of placing them hanging off this line here. I've gotten to the point where often I will place the nose first. This is kind of entirely up to you, but I like to put the nose right in the middle of my face, like that, and it's going to be this triangular sort of skewed diamond shape. So a triangle there, and then just a little triangle off the bottom. Again, kind of depending on the tilt of the head, but since this one's facing forward, this works. Okay, so now that I have the nose in place, the eyes are kind of going to be right at the top of it. The eyes are often open to stylistic choices. So off here, kind of general eyes, you probably want to do in two lines, sort of the top lid and bottom lid. Though honestly, there's a lot of kind of folds in there, a lot of variation between people. So sometimes it'll end up looking more like this with a little fold back there and a little fold over here. So more of 3 lines, 1, 2, and then 3. And then you get the corner of the eye right there where you have your tear duct. Again, this all really depends on style. Depends on how realistic you want to be. If you have a reference, definitely pay attention to that. Pay attention to like the shape of the lids that you're looking at. If you're just sort of pulling from your imagination, I would stick to something simple first, just to get the eye on there. And then you'll find kind of how you like to style them as you continue drawing. Often there's a fold here, sometimes there's not, depending on who you're drawing. Again, eyes are something you can kind of play around with. So I'm just kind of showing you how to place them on the face. So I put them kind of at the top of the nose here, and notice how they are about 1 eye width apart. Again, you can kind of play with the variation on that, but just know that the standard is an eye width apart. It can be more, it can be less. It's, you know, that's just kind of to get you started. All of this is really kind of to get you started. So you have your eyeballs, and then right here at this line, you're gonna have your eyebrows. Eyebrows, I feel like, kind of get overlooked in portrait drawing, and they're super important. So my recommendation is to don't make them too matchy. They don't have to match. They're just patterns of hair growth, basically. But do pay attention to the end of them, like depending on how the person has styled their eyebrows, I guess, the end doesn't have to curve around, but know that the bone structure is really kind of going to force a socket here. So you're basically showing that there is a curve in the skull right there. So if you want to have like a little downward tick in the eyebrows there, it really makes sense, and it kind of helps make your face look a little bit more 3D. Okay, so as you can see, I have erased the middle line there on the nose. I've left some kind of lines there that show you where the nostrils and the structure of the nose are. But at this scale, often I find that like a little triangle works. You can shade underneath to show some depth. Sometimes I like to put a slight shadow here just to show that the tip of the nose kind of comes out a little bit, depending on the person I'm drawing. Okay. So then, as you can see here, mouth will go underneath the nose, like a half an eye. I don't know. This is another thing that varies in people. So I will usually go like a half of an eye length underneath the nose. About like that. You can add shading for the upper lip, because the upper lip is a bit more of a severe angle than the lower lip, so it's angled more like that, where the lower lip's kind of out like that, if that makes sense. So the lower lip's going to appear lighter, especially when drawing people that you don't want to look like are wearing makeup. I would leave the lower lip pretty bare at this stage, at the sketch stage. If you're coloring it in, then obviously you want to give it some color so they don't look dead. But a little indication of the curve of the lower lip right there usually does the trick. So you've got everything kind of mapped out on the face here, which is great. Good job. Now, important feature, you probably want to give your person some ears. Human ears are a bit bigger than we like to think. They go about from your eyebrow down to the tip of your nose. And that seems like a pretty decent ear, I don't know. And then at this point you can kind of start outlining your face, like kind of shoring up your drawing a little bit. I wouldn't do too much on the head unless you're doing someone who is bald, but just kind of get that jawline squared away. So and then you can kind of tell where the neck's going to come. Oftentimes it will come in at an angle, so you want to go kind of from the ear, continue that line down, but you don't want it to be going out or even straight down. Usually people have a little bit of a line like that, and if they're more muscular, it's going to start flaring out here. So you're going to have that trapezius? Sure, muscle right there. So at this point, you have a pretty fine looking head, but oftentimes I find that I have undershot how much cranium we have. So we'll sort of go back and start to trace out a higher line here, so that actually looks a bit more natural. So you've given yourself more space up here for your hairline. Again, foreheads differ, and hairlines differ. I would be shocked if anybody, had like the exact same hairline. So the good thing about that, you don't really have to worry about it because, hey, no rules. And I kind of like the hairline that is a slight swoosh. I don't know, I'm into it lately. It's fun to draw. So, slight swoosh. Oftentimes, you can kind of go off to the side of the face, but there will be a tiny bit of the hairline that comes in like this right above that curve of the brow, which is another good reason to put in that curve on your brow, because then you just draw a parallel line to that right above, and you have a pretty decent hairline. Anyway, so the first part of drawing hair is to draw that hairline, and then you can kind of build the hair on top of it. Even if you have fringe or bangs that cover the hairline here, you probably still want to draw it in just so you know, like these, especially kind of where the hair is growing, what direction it's going to be growing, things like that. So at this point, now that I've drawn the hairline, let's lighten up this line a little. I'm going to bring in my kneaded eraser. And with a kneaded eraser, you can really lighten up your work, just kind of by blotting it and rocking this back and forth. Picks up a lot of that graphite, but I still have a faint trace of that, of his head there. I think I'm going to have him have a kind of long on top style, so I'm going to erase some of these little fluffies. It's going to be full hipster. So this is kind of the fun part to me. I think sometimes it frustrates new artists because there's no prescribed way to do this, but feel free to play around. People's hair do weird things, so I'm going to give him a couple cowlicks. And make sure that when you are drawing hair, you leave room between the top of the head, which is right here, and your hair. So the hair stands up from your skull a little bit, right? But for right now, we're going to go with kind of gravity-defying hair. It's very fluffy. Maybe it's windy. Maybe he's doing a photo shoot and there's just so much mousse in there. I don't know. But there we go. I need to leave that alone. Okay. So that is how you map out a face. Which is fine, and that is a good way to practice, good way to kind of get a feel for where you place things and build your intuition, as it were. But we're going to move on from that, and I'm going to introduce you to more of a gesture-based way to build a face, though it does build upon these skills here. So it's good if you have this locked down, if you have the spacing locked down, it's really going to help in this technique that I'm going to show you. So, whenever you're drawing a head, I feel like it is fair to start with that egg. Even if you're doing kind of gesture-y, start with the egg. And that is kind of where we diverge. So, you're still going to want this center line, but now if you're thinking, oh, I want someone kind of looking off in another direction, I don't want them facing forward, you're going to build that line, and it's going to be curved around your egg still, because that egg is curved in all directions. So, you're kind of going to build these swooshes, kind of like that. So both lines are going to be curved around your egg, and then that sort of shows you where your nose is going to begin. But before we do that, I'm going to show you this technique that I learned a couple years ago, I think. Placing this circle on the end of your egg creates the illusion of a flat surface. So create a little circle there, and then you bisect that circle. Go ahead and drop that line down. And this is kind of where your jaw is. So you have the flat side of the skull here, and that's where your jaw comes out because there is still skull left behind your jaw. Remember that. So now you sort of have the map of the face here. So then the chin intersects that center line. So when you start building the face on a gesture, you can really kind of cheat some of the lines, like, you know, kind of lengthening it or shortening it. And it just sort of gives the head more of a gesture or movement, I guess. And as you can see, I'm sort of fixing the skull once again. Because our skulls will do something more like this. But this little circle is useful for telling kind of where the side of the head is, which is useful for telling where the ear is. And now that you have this and you still have your guidelines, it's pretty easy to kind of map your face out again. And of course, since it's turned to the side, you'll be adjusting this. So the distance between the eyes won't quite be another eye. Your nose won't be a complete little diamond there. But you'll be pretty close. Okay. And again, if you're doing like a bow of the mouth, the peak will be kind of more here at that center line. And then you want to put the shadow of the lower lip off center. Okay, so here, kind of where it comes to the eyes, where the face is supposed to be symmetrical right here, you'll see that this eye over here is going to be a slightly shortened version of the more head-on eye over here. So I'm going to kind of start to erase part of my nose. And you'll see that you can kind of see the bend of the nose here, and that connects directly to the eyebrow. And again, we're going to kind of leave the curve of the eyebrow down here. Just enough to suggest the planes of the face here. So you can see here I've put kind of one side of the eye socket here, so the eye socket can really be drawn as a circle coming down and around from the eyebrow, encircling the eye. So all of this is a little bit indented, so you'll see kind of the bag of the eye there, which most people have. And so now you have kind of the structure of the face here. If you imagine kind of being able to see his skull under his face, you know that you'll go around this, the flat part of the head, and then come in for a cheekbone. And as you can see on the other side, I matched that cheekbone. It does come out a little bit right there, indicating a cheekbone. And voila, you have kind of a more curved rendition of the face, but it followed kind of the same rules, just sort of stretching and squishing some parts, like especially right in here with the eye. You can really see where the nose bridge kind of cuts it off. You can see how the corner of his mouth is closer to the center here, farther from the center here. So everything is kind of in perspective and shortened on this side of the guideline. So as you can see, you're kind of using that sketching line of motion, train clock, to indicate where that face is pointing, sort of what he's doing with his head. There's sort of a movement that goes that way, sort of, because you've bowed the line out this way a little bit. So that is just sort of a gesture drawing of the face, or the face drawing starting with a gesture. I find that the best way to improve doing this is to take your paper, say this here is a blank piece of paper, and draw the same head several times. And I say this just because doing that, you'll be able to tweak little things as you go. So if I filled this page, I'm not going to do it because it's going to take time, with sketches of the same head, and just as I was going changed a little bit each time. So you drew this on this head, and then you look at this picture and you're like, what do I like about it, what don't I like about it? Then when you move on over here, you change something. You're like, all right, I'm going to make his eyes a little bit lower because that looked weird, and maybe make his nose a little shorter. So each time you go in and draw the same head, you're choosing the things you like and keeping them, and changing the things you didn't like, in particular here. And instead of, kind of devoting a whole bunch of time to one drawing that you're then kind of tweaking with eraser and just going back and forth, then you're kind of improving and kind of just creating a kind of repertoire you can pull from. So like, you're creating muscle memory, you know how to build a face at this angle because you've done it like 20 times on this page. So that this is a good way to improve drawing, just by filling a page of a sketchbook with kind of the same drawing. By the time you get down here, your drawing is going to look probably pretty different than it did up here, but you might really like the results better because you've tinkered with it and you've sort of locked it in. You've locked it into your memory there. So there is kind of the typical how you build a face, and then how you morph that around and start to improve upon your face drawing, so that eventually you'll be able to do all kinds of faces. You'll be able to make them all different from one another because you vary, the shapes of the features that you can draw. So I would say, with portraits, like, stick at it. Don't try to do like a full figure right off the bat. I would stick with about this. If you want to improve on faces, don't worry about the shoulders, chest, anything below the shoulders right now. If you really want to improve on this, because then all of your energy will go into making a better face rather than kind of putting it all together. So that is our lesson for today. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for putting up with my rambling. Hopefully it was fun for you, and hopefully you're coming out of it with a good idea of improvements and things you can do with a face. So if you liked this video, feel free to subscribe to the Westland Public Library's YouTube channel and click the bell for updates. Thanks. See ya.